it's such an honor to have such experts on the call. So thank you. And Meg and Jade, look forward to spending more time with you today. So I wanted to just have everyone introduce themselves a little bit and maybe tell us what has been changing for you recently in your life. And let's go ahead and start with Jade, since Megan, we haven't heard anything about you and Jade, and then we'll go around the full circle. So
Awesome. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm Jade Orth. I'm so happy to be here, especially talking about this topic. So what's been changing? I mean, I think for everybody, so much has been changing. But for me, it's actually what I've really been able to notice is I've been really in the divine feminine flow the last, 5 years, maybe plus, where I'm actually starting to balance some of my like divine masculine qualities and seeing how some of that structure and more some more structure has been a little needed in my life. So that's been really fun to see how that's been bringing foundation to even flow more. So that's what's been going on in my life.
cool. Welcome, Jade. I love it. And that's why I was thinking today, the only people missing, Kay, that we have right now are children and the guys. So I know, but we're also the microcosm because we've also been children. We're also the masculine sometimes and everything. So all right, Megan, or
Yes,
Megs.
yeah, Megan. Yes, I go by Megs. I think that's what Kay calls me, right? Is Megs. So no, my name's Megan. I'm chiming in from Illinois tonight outside of Chicago. So I'm cozied up with my tea, sitting in my bed right now. My 17-year-old senior in high school son is here. And so I'm closed into my room while he's out cooking and enjoying the night. So what's changed for me of late is several things. One, my entire life is changing literally because I'm moving to Arkansas and my son is going to school there, and so we're at this huge transitional like pivot for us as a family. And that's exciting. I love change. I'm very ambitious when it comes to change, and I'm actually having to check myself right now because we're not moving ultimately until July, and I'm already trying to live in July, and I have to pull back, right, and be present right here, and also, of course, teaching my son the same thing. But really, the big thing that's changed for me, I feel like lately, is I'm more attuned to my guides. I could say prior to even October, I wasn't having nearly as much interaction as I am now with what I realize are guides. And it's been an incredibly wonderful experience because I feel a youthfulness. I feel like a student. I feel like the wonder of it all right now, like sort of meeting this new part of myself. It's been really exciting. So that's where I'm at.
Excellent. Yes. Patience and wonder. Amy, what about you? What's been changing in your world?
Well, maybe it's that I've been writing a lot about some gut health, something that's been going on with my gut health. I've been trying to figure out the mystery, and I'm feeling better, and I'm getting ready to want to share my writing, and I could use some of the masculine side that Jade has cultivated because I need that kind of, boldness to like strike out and just do it. So yeah, I'm getting ready to publish something, and yeah, excited but scared.
That's so fun. That's so fun. Jess, what about you?
Yeah, thank you. I think, in the classroom, it's been just kind of reassessing because obviously the children are always growing and changing and just trying to kind of keep up with them and their needs. So right now I'm sort of in a place where, we're going to have the winter break. So it'll be a natural transition for me to go back to basics in the space and kind of fall back onto the environment and how the environment does dictate so much of what happens in the space with how people are feeling and working in the space. So I'm excited to have some rest time for me personally and also some time in the space without the kids here so I can kind of revamp and we can all come back refreshed and enjoy a new space. So that's kind of where my head is at right now.
I love it. I love it. Seasons, the seasons.
Yeah.
Samantha, what about you?
So I'm very much in a space of what I call like radical acceptance of just like seeing things as they are and people as they are, and really powerfully coming into a space of like accepting it. Like that's how it is. And I don't have to fix or change it. I can be with anything. And I think that it happens a lot in the classroom. I'm sure Jess will agree, where you're just like, okay, so we're going to have to pivot because we're accepting that that's where we're at in this space today. So that's kind of where I am. And also leaning in, like, and what I mean by leaning in is like being more open to saying yes, and even setting boundaries of no. Like, and each time I've set a boundary, like something amazing has flowed into my life. So again, leaning into boundaries.
I love that. Yeah. So we're going to now get into some of the meat of the topics. And I wanted to first throw it out there, and we can now open up the space as our circle and chime in. So if you are burning to talk, go ahead. I'm not going to call on everyone or anything. Just go ahead. But I am interested in hearing what you guys, each of you, have to say about this. So the first idea is like, what there are types of parenting. So there's permissive parenting, there's strict parenting, there's authoritarian parenting, there's all laissez-faire, there's all these different parenting techniques. And what did you guys experience, and what would you describe conscious parenting is all about? What does it mean? What are the things that characterize it? What do you like about it or don't like?
Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
So I love that question so much. So for me, I'll kind of go backwards with the question, but conscious parenting to me is, when you look at the definition of consciousness or conscious, it's more of like an awareness, right? And so with conscious parenting, I believe it's really just being about aware, not only of all of your inner parts, your triggers, how you did grow up, what you do want, but also being really aware of how the dynamic between you and your child, like I have 3 sons, 7, 9, and 17. And for a while they were on all 3 ego stages of development, but being really aware of what was I going through at those parts of my development, what did I need? And I think that that's what I experienced, a different aspect where, up until 9, so 0 to 9, I had a very, like you said, authoritarian. It was very much about control and fear. And, that old saying, like yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'll give you something to cry about, like that type of stuff. And then it went from kind of just maybe not being as emotionally aware. So I would have these really big, I remember like having this existential crisis at 5 thinking about eternity. But when I would go to one of my parents, it was just like laughing, like, oh, and so I really wanted to try to go into this journey of conscious parenting. But what I really had to understand is just focus on awareness, because I think sometimes, myself included, when I started on this path, it was like this journey to be a perfect parent. Like, what is that? I don't know. I've never met one, and so it's like, okay, you're going in with an awareness, a curiosity, and an openness to grow and do better when you can. So that's kind of what it means for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've read some, not all of Dr. Shafali's book, The Awakened Family, and I got it out again to refresh my memory. And I remember being like sort of bowled over at how difficult it would be, and it seemed to be a conscious parent to, like, I mean, be aware of all of my issues and hangups and fears and hopes, and then to like somehow let those maybe not melt away, but separate those from my interactions with my children. And I think it's something, a challenge that I'll be working on my entire life. But I think it's a wonderful goal, and I get how that would be so healing and would feel so good to a child to be seen for who they are and what they're doing, and their achievements or their, you know, whatever times they messed up, instead of like, how does this affect me as a parent, and oh my gosh, you know, this reminds me of how I failed or how my parents treated me, you know, and so it becomes all about the parent instead of the child. So I can see how amazing it can be and will be for my kids and I, but like I'm saying, it's a very ongoing ongoing process.
Megan, you seem like you're thick in contemplation.
Yes, yes. So for me, conscious parenting, it's meant many different things at different stages. Now that my son is 17, it's a radically different approach. So to say, my tool bag has had to change tools out for this stage, and now, like, looking back on that, I realize how phase oriented it could be. You know, in particular when they're newborns, when they're infants, recognizing them as an intelligent being, for example, that this is a person that has intuition already. So for me, one of the pinnacle behaviors in conscious parenting began at that stage, and that was a pulling back and allowing the space for this being to like, almost like the dignity to have their own experience. So it's this lack of micromanaging their precious souls, their life, every like minuscule thing. It's like very opposite of what we might call a helicopter parenting situation. But and that's not even a judgment. There's times that you must hover and watch. But I think for me, it's been an incredible act of letting go, giving them the space, that dignity to make their own decisions, live the life that they were born to live, step away from my imprint of who I want you to become, detaching altogether from even having a desire of who I want him to become. And now that he's older, what it's meant is really raw conversations, real conversations, and no bullshit. So that's what it's meant for me.
Yeah,
Sounds great.
powerful. I'm seeing a lot of through lines in this, you know, growth mindset, and realizing these children are smart from the beginning and kind of allowing them to be who they are. Jess and Sam, any other thoughts on like what you guys experienced as, you know, in parenting, or how would you even describe modern parenting or conscious parenting?
Yeah, I guess what I'm most struck about from what I'm hearing is just how in alignment with Montessori really conscious parenting seems to be. I mean, you're meeting children where they're at through all their developmental stages. You know, we talk about the spiritual preparation of the teacher, and I think you could just swap out the word teacher for parent. But it really does seem to be parenting is a spiritual practice. I believe teaching is a spiritual practice, and there's so much of that reflection that we have to do, and and children demand it in the moment, which is the ultimate act of mindfulness, right? Because we can think about it and we can conceptualize all we want, but then of course best laid plans. Now we're dealing with a situation in real time with a child, or they're asking a question that we could not have anticipated they would ever ask, or not at this time or stage. So they really do keep us on our toes. But yeah, I think that my takeaway right now is just how struck I am by the alignment between conscious parenting and Montessori philosophy. It really is a spiritual practice, and also seeing the child as a spiritual being, and recognizing that and having reverence for that and holding space for that.
Yeah. Samantha, anything from you before we go in deeper?
Yeah, the obviously echoing a lot of what has already been said, but the big thing for me was allowing a space for mistakes. Like, really, like, you have to kind of let go of a lot of the judgment or preconceived notion, or why is the child doing this? and just be with what is happening in the moment. And then there's been a lot of like lessons of forgiveness and accountability, and me opening the space for like, whoa, maybe mom overstepped there, and I can be accountable. And I also teach him and my kids, I have two boys, they're 9 and 12, and I teach them forgiveness, which that comes along with the whole conscious practice of like, I get to be mindful of my actions, and also be respectful of where they are growth and development wise, and they're allowed to have bad days. They're allowed, because there's this space, there's teachable moments in each of those interactions. And so being, the conscious parenting space just allows for those things to happen so that they can be supported through each of those different stages that they're in.
Yeah. Speaking of us making mistakes as parents, like you said, or does anyone have any stories that I'm sure people are going to relate to of how it has been challenging to evolve as parents from the old way of doing sit right there, do as I say, don't speak to until spoken to. Like, of course, there's a lot less dramatic ways to think about it, but it is a very different thing to interact in this way. So have there been any challenges that you guys want to share that got you knowing something for next time?
Well, I can definitely speak to that because I'm in a little bit different situation. I have 4 grown children, but I had them right in a row. So I had 4 children under the age of 6. And so you can imagine, like, I'm not sure that was the most conscious decision, but it was fun, and that's what we did. So be that as it may, one of the things that I have come into the awareness of is that in hindsight, because I don't think I was at a point in my spiritual and human development where I could be a completely conscious parent. But like Samantha said, one thing that I know is that it's not about perfection. And one of the things that came into my awareness about raising 4 young children at the same time was that in the chaos of everyday life, making sure everybody's fed and dressed and safe, things happen, lots of things happen. And I found there's things that happened that I found out later were really traumatic for my kids. And they might have been something as, simple to me as getting their hand caught in a door or in a drawer or something like that, or being frightened by a dog in the neighborhood. And they're just, like sometimes you just don't know how life is impacting those kids, and you wouldn't even know what to ask them about how they were feeling about certain situations. And so that's why I say it's really not about perfection, because they came in with a soul plan to live a certain life, and you may or may not have been part of developing that plan, and you certainly don't know what it is when they come into your arms. And so I just think that parents deserve so much grace for how much they do at the incredible task it is to bring a child from infancy into adulthood. It's a monumental feat, and I just give kudos to all the parents out there.
I love hearing that. I love hearing the grace, and that it's a tough job that we're just trying to do our best with. And on that note, Zenka, you had mentioned like parenting styles are always changing and everything. And I think I determined that when I grew up, the experts thought, this was in the 70s, that children had low self-esteem and that they needed to parents to boost their self-esteem. They had to tell them, you're good, you're smart, and compliment them a lot. And so then as an adult, I felt like that had damaged me in the sense that like I felt that my worth was connected to what I did well, like what I performed well, or if I was pretty or not, and so I made this mission to not praise my children for things that they did or how they looked or things like that, because I thought that that was going to make them feel like that I loved them more just for who they were. But I think I went in the opposite direction. And, you know, one of my daughters complained that I never, you know, compliment her. I never like praised her or said good job for getting straight A's or for getting a job, you know, doing things well. Like we didn't she said, you just made it seem like it was just like some expected, like something that is normal and everybody does. And so, yeah, I mean, I wish I had been more balanced, you know, not completely thrown out the praise, you know, but found a way to do it without ideally making them feel like that was all that I cared about, you know? So anyway, yeah, just learning as you go.
Yeah, that was something that I remember hearing, you know, in parenting class. They're like, don't tell your kid good job, because you want the locus of their satisfaction to come from their little heart and what they are, you know, not to like always externally like do whatever makes everyone else happy and everything, you know. So these are the kinds of philosophical, psychological shifts that we're in right now as a society going, wait, what's going on? And same thing about, you're no longer, according to, you know, conscious parenting, you're no longer supposed to say like, oh, you are stupid, or you are fat, or something that defines the children in that moment. It's like, oh, you're acting silly right now because I know you know how to do this, or something like that. It's always describe it in the now moment. And we discussed that a little bit earlier when we were talking about what is now. You know, you might not always be feeling sad, but you're sad now. You're not a sad kid, you're sad now, you know, that kind of a thing. So it's interesting to prepare for that flexibility. Anybody else have a moment where they were like, wow, this didn't work out like I had thought, I took it too far or not far enough? Or
Sure, I'll go. I actually, Amy, I love what you said in the sense that I think that that's I know myself included with other parents that I've spoken to, is a lot of times that pendulation happens, you know, when we're trying to heal something or be aware of something where it's like the other side of the coin, right? The total opposite. So one of the things that I tried to do is like with my oldest, I didn't know how to process big emotions like anger or sadness, things like that. And so I always tried to make things better for him. And then it became where he couldn't necessarily self-resource. We had a lot of, you know, codependent tendencies. And so looking back now, you know, what Kay said, there's so much grace. And each of these children came at very different times of my evolution and consciousness and times in the world. So hindsight, sure, there's a whole bunch of things that I would look back on and be like, ooh, but I think what, you know, many people have mentioned, it's really trying to find that balance, or like being in the and, or like, yes, this happened and this could be true. Like both can be true. Like I could have maybe had this in my childhood and this didn't work, and maybe my child needs this. And so it's really trying to be in that space of just kind of holding things more lightly is what I've learned. But yeah, there's a lot that hindsight, and it's all part of the journey, my journey, their journey, all of it. So that's what I kind of have to share on that.
yeah, so anyone want to share how they look at discipline and conscious parenting? So instead of, you know, maybe fear or punishment, what are the other things without eroding trust between the teacher and the child, or the parent and the child? Ideas, help, SOS, what have you guys encountered?
I'd love to talk about this. One, and this is just going to actually be a very short and simple, because we could go off on many, you know, many layers. But for me, it's really about if there must be a consequence, the consequence must fit the crime, right? Like that was always really big deal for me, because it helped. It was a guiding post for me, and it felt a little bit harsh if you remove like an authoritative parenting model from that situation. and really, really think about what discipline means. But I typically didn't go for much discipline as I did natural consequences, right? For me, the beginning of my parenting journey started when I was living in a group home when I was 22, raising other children that weren't mine, homeless children. And I actually was exposed to being taught how to parent because that was my title, domestic. I was like a domestic volunteer. That was my title, right? So it was really cool. I was in this nonprofit and actually learning parenting techniques years before I had children. But for me, I love taking a step back and going, what are the natural consequences from what just happened? And let's teach about how that is going to play out in their life and how that's what they actually have to work through. And I'm here to help you work through those natural consequences. So that's what I have to say about it.
See, we got to invent all these cool new words. Jess, Samantha, anything from you guys on this, on techniques, trust?
Yeah. So in the classroom, something that we is a big part of the curriculum, and right now with everybody being so excited for the holidays and everybody's in this hyper state at the moment, we have to do a whole lot of conflict resolution. And so teaching iMessages, and today I actually had 2 boys who both had hurt feelings about a couple of things. And so pulling them aside and, because you don't know what you don't know. And of course, this is all practice, and we all have great days where we do it well and other days where we're like, oh, darn, why did I do it that way? Hindsight's 2020. But, one of the kiddos was immediately kind of pointing a finger at the other one, and you always do this thing. And so, of course, the other child's like, well, you always do this thing. And so, I kind of let them do that for a minute. And then I was like, well, how can we reframe that? So you can have ownership for how you feel about it and what your perspective is. And your job over here is to just listen. And my job here is to be a facilitator and help you both get to a place where you can hear each other. And, that takes a long time. Like, I wish I could add up all of the time that I do that on a daily basis. Like, how much of my, 8 to 10 hour shift is like that, but it's the most important thing because, like I tell the kids, I always tell them, you're here to learn. And I hope, and to be excited about learning. And there's so much about the world that we're going to learn together. You'll teach me, I'll teach you. But ultimately, what we're here to do is to learn how to be great community members. And this is a place where we get to practice that. So I think, really teaching iMessages as early as possible. And, certainly with the younger kids, you can even do that just with very succinct words and, you're modeling for them. But it really is just such a foundation in our curriculum here. And I think it's just such a conscious way to operate. I mean, it's what we would do with our partners, hopefully, right? Or our friends, and just kind of extending that to them too. It's really useful, and we've had great results with it.
And I would say a lot of what I do in the classroom and at home really has to do with allowing the child to self-reflect immediately. They're very intuitive and they're very in tune. So in the moment, like, it usually starts with a look. Like, I'll just give a firm look and be like, what just happened there? And they'll immediately be like, and then they'll come over and we'll talk about it. We'll talk through, like, what's going on? Why did you do that? You just run through regular questions that we would normally ask ourselves too. Like, that seemed a little out of character. And then seeing if they maybe were missing a tool. Maybe they didn't have a coping mechanism for, why their anger escalated or threw a toy or got in an argument. So offering different tools so they know what to do next time. And then if it didn't improve, there's also intervention. So sometimes it's just sometimes I even ask the child, like, what do you think is fair as a consequence? Because this has happened more than one time. So let's talk through what that would look like. And interestingly enough, usually the kid will give a harsher consequence to themselves than I would have even thought of. And I'm like, whoa, that might be a little much. So let's scale
Yeah.
that back a little bit and negotiate what is actually fair for what happened. So I think it's really about being in communication, being an active listener so they can also hear, labeling those emotions because that's usually what's going on. Something is unprocessed, and then giving them those tools so they have an opportunity to practice in the future so that if they ever encounter that, which, we're all going to encounter some kind of argument, disagreement, conflict, have big emotion, that they're equipped to handle that next time.
Yeah, that's so funny. I feel that's so true about the kids, giving themselves harsher consequences. And I was like, oh, like when someone first suggested, like, have the kids be involved in, the consequence, the discipline, I was like, well, that's never going to work. They'll say, like, well, I think nothing should be, but I was so surprised. And so that's something I'm not great with discipline. And I kind of am looking back on something that's going on right now. Like two of my sons have been going late to high school and I noticed that they were leaving later, but I didn't notice that they were actually late for class until we got some feedback from teachers. So I kind of wish I had said, well, I love the word fair. What would be a fair consequence for not going? But instead I told one of my sons, the younger one, well, we're not going to do after school, video games or like phone games for a while until this gets under control. And the older one, I didn't say that because I kind of figured that he was capable of doing it. Like I think he recognized, I could just sense. And so I think if he keeps being late, I might say like, listen, this is really, you and Jess, you were talking about I statements. Like I think it's really important that you're on time to school. This is like really mean, this is one of your basic responsibilities is just going to see, getting there and, doing your best and showing and coming up late when you live so close to school just shows, I don't know, to me, it seems disrespectful and it just is not the best you can do. So, how can what do you think, what's the issue? I guess, yeah, like asking them like, well, maybe they're probably not getting enough sleep. Can I help you with that? Or, what can I do to help? And sort of like making it a conversation, like there's a problem, let's brainstorm solutions. Yeah, we do that sometimes at our family meetings, but not about discipline. But yeah, I wish I would always, take it from that stance, but
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. And yeah, when they're part of the whole, it's so funny how I can just watch all this stuff like echoing into companies and how we run society already, because already people don't want to have bosses, they want to work in a circle, it's like horizontal organizations and stuff like that. So they're demanding it, this change in evolution is demanding it, and then it's actually permeating in everything. And then even in our own lives, like we don't like to be told what to do or punished or forced or bullied or whatever, so this is like, oh, let's get down to this, think about it. So and okay, so the next thing we wanted to talk about was like how you recognize when you're being triggered and something that has been uncomfortable in your parenting, like a trauma. But then also I was thinking, why are we asking this question in the positive? Like, what are the things that your mom did that you loved that you also bring back? Like, okay, doing the pumpkin thing, or the Easter bonnet thing or whatever. Like, so talk about that. Like, are there any times that you have, worked through triggers like, oh, I'm feeling this way because, and how to deal with it? Or also like, what are the triggered memories that you've enjoyed replicating?
Yeah, I'll talk about that. I love what you're saying because I think they're called, I've seen like glimmers or something. So instead of triggers, it's like glimmers. And so really being able to bring both, like the and, right? Like this used to really trigger me. And oh my gosh, I loved when this happened. So to be able to see in that lens of kind of a full spectrum, I love that. For me, triggers, it's more about my body cues. So I've had to get so in touch with what's happening in my body sensations, which can be hard for people when you disassociate and you're like, oh, I don't have any sensation, or I just left. So depending on what end of the spectrum, I've been on, whether it's a fight or flight or a freeze, but I have to get so present in my body, and I'll start to kind of feel it cue up, like, oh, my heart's starting to race, my hands are getting hot, and just really go to the basics so I don't replay the story. Because oftentimes in the past, if I started to replay the story, that part, you're already too far gone usually to be able to, create space or take a moment away, and so I always listen to my body. And now my kids will know. You had mentioned something earlier too about trust and discipline. And so for me, boundaries in our house, boundaries, because then there's already a natural consequence. Like, this is the boundary, and every single time this is the thing. So if I say I have to take a moment, that's a boundary. Like, I'm getting too upset and I need a moment. And then the kids will do that too. Like, I remember my youngest is 7 now, but even at 3, he'd be like, to his brother, you crossed my boundary, don't touch my body. But it's so cool to hear them advocating for that. So for me, it's just really being in tune with what happens, and then I work on it later. So sometimes if anybody's heard of parts theory or parts work, I'll even tell like the part of me that I think is getting triggered. Like, I'll tend to you later. Like, internally, I'll say that, and then I'll work through that later, not obviously in the process of what I'm dealing with my kids.
Wow, big wisdom. Very cool.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is funny how life shows you the things, again, it's like, wow, here we go. Well, I remember a parenting coach used to be like, it's the luge chute. That sport where you just go down the slides. They're just like, that's your luge chute. Like, that's where your parents went down. That's where you're going down. And you're just like, this is so hard to change gears, But it's such an interesting process. So
I have an interesting comment on the triggers. I've been having an interesting experience. I think one of the things that's happening with me and my parenting is I'm also feeling this I don't even know what to call it, the new level, which is when some of the scripts start to flip with their aging parents, and the child is sort of becoming the parent now to their aging parents. And where my brain is going with the question is, it's triggering as I'm entering this new realm with my parents, I keep having wonderful rushes of the love that they gave me as a child. And the way that this is all coming full circle, and I'm watching I'm becoming an observer quite a bit. How am I parenting my child? How is this going to roll back in, 30, 40 years for me, etc. It's been a really incredible thing to watch the projecting and the mirroring and the reflection going on in these 3 generations right now. And I would have never thought of it as triggers, but it's triggering this deep contemplation of my parents. How am I going to love them? And how am I weaving all this into the parenting that I'm currently engaging in with my son? It's like I'm really observing this. A lot of memories. Childhood.
I would say that one of a lot of my parenting was definitely from my wounding. And I didn't recognize that until much later when I became aware of how these things operate. And I have had to go back to my children and have a conversation about how I parented them. And so I think it's definitely easier to be a conscious parent as you're going through it than to have to double back and apologize. But also there are going to be things in your child's life that didn't go well for them, that you participated in, and you have to be open enough to hear their experience and feel the damage that you did unintentionally. And to, even though it was a different experience than you had in that moment, you didn't necessarily experience it the same way that they did. And so, you know, and these are like big, hard feelings sometimes, and it's very, very challenging, but the reward of it is like a new relationship can be formed on this. And you're also modeling for them, like it's okay, like we can go back and fix things that need to be fixed, or address issues that, you know, we didn't have the wherewithal to address when they were younger. It's tough though. Oh my God, it's really tough.
But forging new relationships based on, on truth and connection, so powerful. Jess, what do you have any tools up your sleeve for burnout and relaxing and giving yourself like, okay, I'm at my saturation point. What do you do? What do you guys all do to work on parenting burnout or teacher burnout?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Senka. I think it really does kind of go back to knowing yourself, right? And I think that just comes with age, experience, reflection. But I know what I need to feel good in my body. So for me, like movement is really crucial, and I also know that that's a goal for the children. So I've been playing some street hockey at school. That's that's been fun. Yoga definitely. I got my yoga teacher training many, many years ago, but that's something that I'm trying to bring in with the children. And every day at our school, in all the classrooms, we weave in mindfulness. So we start our day, either we're doing some tapping technique, we're doing some deep breathing. I bring in some art therapy. We're like drawing, we're using different colors to express feelings in the moment, those kinds of things. But we like to really start our day with that. Sometimes we'll grab like an intention card. Like yesterday, it was purposefulness. So we talked about what that meant to different people, and the children are super receptive to this. I mean, this is something that they're used to doing now that we're in the second quarter, and we've always done it at school in some iteration. I'm actually one thing that I really love to do, and I don't do enough of, but I really love the practice of yoga nidra. So I don't know if I'm sure some folks here are familiar with that, but it's one of the girls had said to me recently, because she was just so beat, and she's like, "Can we just take a nap?" And once they get to this age, there's no nap time at school, so which is very challenging, because we would all love a nap time sometimes. And she mentioned this to me, and I thought, well, why not try yoga nidra? So on Friday, kind of as a gift to the students and to myself, we're going to have some yoga nidra time, and everybody's going to curl up with their blankets and their jackets, and we're just going to try to relax and just lean into this kind of winter hibernation vibe that's happening, and try to take it down several notches as everybody's excited for their own holidays that they're going to be doing soon with their families. So, just I think moments like that, but incorporating something every day, if whether sometimes it's only 2 minutes of silence that we get to, and we just celebrate those 2 minutes, like, wow, 60 kids, you were just silent for 2 whole minutes. Like, that's a huge feat, because at the charter school, our classrooms are quite large. So yeah, everything's worth celebration when we do, focus inward. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Such cool ideas.
Amazing. I want to go to your school.
I know, it's so cool. You like
Wow.
yoga nidra too, Amy, right?
Yeah, I do. And I was gonna say, for me, like how I discovered what I needed as a parent was when I got to a point where I was just completely depleted. I had like devoted everything to our 5 children, and I didn't realize that I had lost myself in the process. And I went on a retreat that a friend of mine was holding, and I was hooked after that. And yeah, so, but it's amazing how, or it's interesting how I started going, getting on a plane, going to Michigan or Kripalu in Massachusetts. But over the years, because I noticed how restorative, how replenishing, how much I needed that time away, partly because I'm maybe not great at boundaries and saying no. So I needed to literally remove myself from the vicinity. So it was like a big no, it was like, oh, she's gone. She can't do this. She can't do that. It's also because I love taking care of people. I love it. And I tend to go overboard, maybe also because I want people to love me and I like do more, maybe because I, want that validation. So being away from it all like forces me to just cut all those ties and just be by myself in nature with the great mystery and just connect to the deeper part of myself. And I just come back so refreshed. But like over the years I've learned to find these little retreats closer and closer to home. Like one now there was one I went to, it was 4 hours away. Now I found one that's an hour away that I can book a night. And I've also been taking nature walks like during the week. Like I was so frustrated with my writing last fall that my coach was like, just forget writing. Like what, and I was telling her about how I went on this retreat and how I just wanted to be out in these meadows and these woods the whole time. She's like, do that. So I built into my schedule, like literally an hour here, 40 minutes there, like, an hour and a half on that day, just going to these different nature preserves or like parks near me. And so that's like a mini retreat and it's so good. It's so good for me to like disconnect from society and my to-do list and my computer and my email and all just the things, get kind of wound up in and just release. And I'm sure it's good for my parenting too, just because I'm just a more relaxed person and more in touch with like a deeper side of life that way.
Anybody else want to share their techniques to kind of refresh and come back? Okay, so the last question is perhaps one of the most poignant in this day and age is how do you keep the kids from not wanting to do screen time all the time or gaming or whatever? So what have been your tips and tricks for that journey in 2024?
Tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, Amy, did you want to speak to that more?
No,
Or
no, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, so I have, like I said, my three sons who a lot of their friends, it's all like, gaming and all of that stuff. They do play sports also. But I've really had to surrender into technology's not going anywhere. That's how I look at it. Like if sometimes I joke that if I could have it my way, we would be in a forest playing all day, like after school, but that's not the reality. I live in Arizona and half the year it's too hot to even go to a park. So we've just had to set realistic times and boundaries and where we don't like do no screen time, but we do actually do longer periods during the weekend. That's what works for our family because during school days, we can't, it's just, and they know that I'm going to let you play a little longer in the weekend and maybe it goes above or past what I would like. But they'll play, for a couple hours and that's honestly where they dive in. But we also try to do nights where my husband will get Super Smash Bros. Like Nintendo 64 or something where we connect with them and play, because I think that's really important to show them that we're valuing the connection that it creates with their friends, with our family, and using it as not something that they can just get lost in and not something that we're going to totally withhold. It's where they're going to feel this like longing or obsession. So am I saying we have it down pat? Absolutely not. There are days where I'm like, oh my God, we've hit the mark. Their eyes are glazy. We went past that. But it's something that we constantly just try to navigate and find what works for our family. So.
So
I
hard.
would say, um, setting limits, like the other one said, the other people said, but also I bring awareness, like if they've played games a lot, they can be aware of how they feel. You know, if they've played a long time, they tend to be a little bit more irritable. So I just bring awareness to, like, do you have any, do you know, is there anything you did today that might have contributed to you feeling this way? Or if they are like strongly desiring it to where, you know, they're frustrated about it, I'm like, you know, do you think that the screen time might have an effect on how you're behaving? And, you know, I don't make them right or wrong. I just point the light there so that they begin to become aware. And now they're at a point where they're like, oh, I had too much games. I had trouble sleeping. Or, you know, I'm being we always call it hasty. I'm being extra hasty today, mom. So I shouldn't do as much video games as yesterday. So it's really, you know, I try not to do so much of make wrong whenever possible, and set boundaries, but also give them grace to push the boundary so that they can become consciously aware of what happens if they use it too much. Just like eating too much sugar, right? It's the same thing. Like after the kid like has all of that sugar, they might not feel very well. It's bringing their awareness to the same thing, that screen time also has effect on how well they sleep, or their attitude for that day, and things of that nature.
Yeah, I rely heavily on the parental controls that they have thankfully now instituted. But when my daughters were teenagers, like there was nothing that you could put on iPhones, for example. So yeah, I mean, it's not like a sure thing, because one of my sons has a very amazing way of guessing the screen time password, or sleuthing it out. So when I notice him like more on his phone, I'm like, wait a second. And so like, I can look and on his whatever and see how much time he's spending on things. And one time it was like, he spent a lot of time on, it was either Discord or Microsoft Teams, and I realized that he had found like a secret tunnel, and so anyway, I'm always having to change the screen time password, but that for me feels the best, because it's like I don't have to be like, time to get off or whatever. I mean, I still sometimes have to do that. And then I can also use it, like, especially with younger kids. Well, if they're like, oh, can I have 15 minutes on games or whatever? Well, have you cleaned a litter box? Have you played the piano? Have you done your homework? Then I have some control, instead of feeling very out of control and like nagging and pulling and starting to get upset and all that stuff. So I try to use those things as much as I can, the screen time, whatever technology limits that are built into some of the programs. And you can, a lot of them have them, like even, Xbox, and you can turn off your Verizon or, whatever, like internet provider, you can have that go off at a certain time. So they can't even like so they don't watch TV until 4 a.m. Anyway, like I've had all sorts of situations that, I had to find out where there were things that I could use like that. But yeah, it's the challenge, even for me. Like I like to spend a lot of time on my computer, and maybe I'm writing, but maybe I'm like researching or getting things done. Like I need to have them see me reading more and like not on my computer like a lot, even though I like categorize it as, this is creative, or this is like productive or whatever, this is different, but is it really? Like, I don't know, like it might not seem like that to them. And yeah, like I need the time in nature. I need the time to put my face in a book, or to just like lie there and on the ground and pet the cat, or sit there and watch them what they're doing, like instead of, always just on my little wheel. So yeah.
Yeah, so amazing to have all you guys sharing your wisdom today on this evolutionary curve that we're on. And it is, I just feel the world is in a better place knowing that we're like earnestly from our hearts wanting to do things always in a slightly better way. And it's, all the challenges come, they're so different and so mysterious, and yet it's these conversations. I always wanted like a VR program where it's like practice saying this, I'm like, okay, I'm in this situation, I'm gonna say, or whatever. So it's great to hear you guys kind of go over the details, and share different scripts and how you phrase things and how you say things, as we know words are so important. So thank you especially to Kay for being so amazing and bringing wisdom together and women together over these months. I mean, the topics have just been so incredible, from health to all sorts of things. And it's always so cool to get this amount of different perspectives on a single topic. So thank you so much. I learned so much. Thanks for sharing your time with me, all of you guys, and for everyone watching.
Thank you, Zenka. This was good for me too. It was great to meet you all and hear all your perspectives and to brush up on these concepts. It's always needed.
Okay,
Thank you,
guys.
friends.